how are you going to market this game differently than Callasia? What did you do? What did you do? What are you gonna? If the big failure of Callasia was marketing, then what are you doing different? So let me answer this question with two pieces of information. One, we're going to talk about the marketing of Callasia and what we did, and two, we're going to talk about what I'm planning to do. So, why did Callasia financially fail? What was the problem with Callasia? And it fail's a strong word. We made some money. It did all right. But if the question is why didn't we have a huge Hearthstone style success? Blah blah blah. There's a lot of reasons for it. I'm not sure I know all of them. I'm not sure I know which ones are the most important. And when we talk about marketing, you have to understand marketing isn't just advertising. People think of marketing and advertising as being interchangeable terms. They're not. Advertising is the specific action of going out and exposing your game to people through whatever media and letting them know that you exist, right? Advertising is letting people know that you exist and what your value proposition is. Marketing includes advertising. That's a big part of marketing. But another big part of marketing is creating that value proposition, creating what it is that you're making sure that you're making the right thing, and making sure that there is a market for the thing that you're making, and that the product itself includes features that can help you do well with that market. That's huge. That's the bigger part of marketing. So, I mean, you can think of marketing sort of as two big parts. One, figuring out what to make, and two, telling people that you made it for them, right? That's kind of the two big parts of marketing. So let's talk about the first one for a minute, because I think in Callasia we made some errors. One of the big errors that we made in Callasia was that the game was very difficult to understand. That doesn't seem like a marketing error, but in many ways it is a marketing error. The major way that games sell today is not through advertising. It's not through Facebook clicks or blah 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 blah. And I'm talking about real games. I'm not talking about free-to-play crap. I'm talking about actual real strategy games. Games that do well on Steam. If you look at the RimWorlds and the whatnot, RimWorld didn't go out and buy a whole bunch of users. RimWorld didn't buy a bunch of advertising. RimWorld got popular through word of mouth. People played RimWorld and liked RimWorld and told people, hey, RimWorld's a good game. You should come play RimWorld. And they bought RimWorld. And when they bought RimWorld, there's an equation on Steam. And the equation said, how many people played this game? How many people bought it? And you know what? If a bunch of people played it, also bought it, then Steam says, you know what we need to do is make sure more people play this game, because it looks like if they play this game, they're going to buy it. And so there's an actual little algorithm that basically says, what percentage of people played this game, how many of those people bought this game, and specifically, how much money did they pay for it, right? And so if you're a $3 game and a bunch of people bought you, well, that's nice. If you're a $20 game and a bunch of people bought you, that's a lot nicer, because Steam makes 30% of that, right? And so Steam is not interested in how many units you sold. Steam is interested in how much money did you make. And so if you sold 50 units of a $20 game and you sold 75 units of a $5 game, they're way more interested in that $20 game than they are in that $5 game, because they make a lot more money out of that. And what that does is it pushes you up in the rankings. And the real answer of how do you sell a bunch of games on Steam is largely based on Steam. It's largely based on where you show up in the rankings on Steam. And so, as ridiculous as it sounds, one of the big answers to the marketing question is make a game that more people buy. I mean, it sounds really simple, but that's honestly most of the answer. Because if you make a game that more people buy, then more people will be able to see it, because Steam will lift you up and put you in all the, higher in the rankings. And when you're higher in the rankings, the chance that somebody's going to find you is higher, and blah, blah, blah. It's a cycle, right? And as much as I would like to say that, we're going to do this, or blah, 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 and it's all about streamers and live, that's all part of the puzzle. That's actually maybe 10% of the puzzle. A solid 80-90% of the puzzle is honestly right there on the Steam page. And it's about, did people find your game on the Steam page? When they found your game on the Steam page, did it look like something they might be interested in? And did the people who find the game on your Steam page, were they the right people? Because remember, the equation is based on how many people who played your game bought your game. So if you bring in 500,000 people who don't like your game, that actually tanks you in the equation. That does terrible things to you, because that you're going to have metrics that say all these people played your game and no one bought it. And the algorithm understands that as your game sucks, right? It doesn't understand that equation as there were 200,000 people that really should have never downloaded the game, but they downloaded the game because somebody on a live stream told them to, or told them they would get stickers on a live stream or something like that. If there was some external thing that equation doesn't understand that drove people to your game, and they all downloaded your game purely for the purpose of getting that external goal, the equation understands that as your game sucks, and it drops you down in the rankings, and it's bad. And so the real struggle is not about bringing as many users as you can in. It's about making sure that you're bringing in the right users. And so did we do that in Callasia? I'm not sure that we did. It was a very difficult to understand game. A lot of people played it, said, yeah, I'm not really into this. It's kind of difficult. Maybe it's fun. That thing really went against us, went against the word of mouth of people playing. We had a community that was very nice and very good, but it was very small. So when people came in to play on a multiplayer-focused game, they said, yeah, there's nobody here to play against, and they left. The ramp up to understand the game was very long and hard, and so we had to kind of power people through this time that they didn't understand what they were doing. All of that worked against us. And so from the very beginning in Last Regiment, that's been my focus. How do we make sure that you understand the game right from the beginning? How do we make sure that the player can get in, immediately have fun, and also in the earlier phases of the game when we don't have a huge multiplayer community, if they get in and if they open up this game and there's no multiplayer to play because there's nobody to play against, is the single player campaign fun? And is the game interesting enough that, you know, if they've got a couple friends who enjoy a game like this, that they can go ping one of their friends and say, hey, I really want to play a multiplayer game. Can you play this game with me? And not have the problem that we had in Callasia of, and do you mind spending the next 2 weekends learning how to play this game well? That's the big part of the marketing. Now, there's also the advertising part. And I'm not discounting the advertising part. So what did we do to advertise Callasia? We went to conventions. For those of you who've never been to a game convention, they're expensive. To buy a booth, the smallest booth you can buy at PAX, about $1,500. But that's not the real problem. The problem is you got to, load that booth full of computers. And we do a very do-it-yourself style, very indie-looking booth. I don't buy in any special furniture or beanbag chairs or anything like that. We just basically bring some computers and throw some computers up. But I still have to buy the computers. And in fact, the computers I bought to run Callasia are already outdated and can't really run our game very well. So we basically have, to pay for the computers. We have to pay for the table. But more importantly, we got to pay to fly me out to wherever it is. So let's say it was PAX in Boston. For me to get round trip to Boston is another $1,500. Plus I got to rent a car, something while I'm there. Plus once I'm there, these conventions are, especially in Boston, the hotels are crazy expensive. So $200 a night for a hotel. By the time you're all done, we easily spend $4,000 to $5,000 to have the absolute cheapest option of a booth that you can have for a convention. So, all right, there's $5,000 down the drain. What do you get for your $5,000? So the last time we went to PAX South, which, by the way, to the guys who were at PAX South, thanks very much. It was a good show. We had a lot of fun. I certainly enjoyed it. Did that work as a marketing vehicle? In terms of, well, let me rephrase that. Did that work as an advertising vehicle? What we took away from PAX South was like 300 email addresses, something like that, of people who might be interested in the game. And for that, we spent $5,000. Now, was it worth it to go to PAX? For me, yes, it was worth it to go to PAX. I had a good time. I saw some nice stuff. Most importantly, I got to sit and watch people play the game. And that experience of going to a convention and watching people play games, that was very useful to me. Seeing human beings that I've never seen before sit down and play their first 5 minutes of this game was a very good experience for me. So I'm not saying that PAX South was a waste of time. But as an advertising vehicle, is it worth it to spend $5,000 to get 300 or 400 email addresses? No, of course not. That's a terrible spend of money. If the only thing that we pulled away from PAX South was that email list as an advertising vehicle, there's a hell of a lot cheaper ways to reach 400 people, right? I could go buy Google ads. I could go buy Facebook ads. For $1.50, I can ensure clicks on a Facebook ad. Take that $5,000, put $1.50 into it. How many people do you get? A hell of a lot more than 300, right? And those are 300 people who were interested enough in your Facebook ad to click through and see your game. So, as an advertising vehicle, I don't actually see conventions as being an incredibly good use of time or money. So I'm not sure how many more conventions we're going to go to in the near future. I'm still debating this, because like I say, watching people play the game still has huge value to me. Having a chance for people who are really into the game to come talk to us and all that has value. But from a purely advertising standpoint, if I'm relying on the convention to power our advertising, that's not going to do much. So there's that, right? And other people say, yeah, Facebook has notoriously poor value for sure, yeah, I get that. But you know what? That if I were to have gotten at $1 each those click-throughs, and that's pretty high for a click-through. Even at $1 each, $5,000, that's 5,000 people. Even if 10% of them had converted to sales, that's still 500 sales of a game, of a $20 game. 500 times 20, that's still what's 500 times 20? It's $10,000, right? So that's positive, right? That's net positive. I take the 5,000 I put into it, subtract that out of the 10,000, I'm still 5,000 up. So if that math were true, dude, I'd buy those all day, right? So there's that math. Same math to the convention. I got about 300 emails from that convention. I would say at least 20% of those emails was that guy being polite because we shoved something in his face and made him sign it. I get 200, 250 actual humans, even if every single one of them bought the game. If I had 100% of those people buy the game, it's still a loss, right? So again, in terms of return on investment, conventions are a very bad return on investment as a purely advertising vehicle. I don't see it being much. Now, there is another side to conventions, which is the next bit, which is marketing to media. Now, while most of the people who came and sat were just some friendly person who wanted to come play our game, if somebody from Kotaku or Polygon came down and loved our game and was really into our game, that would be worth something. If somebody from one of those magazines were to walk by the booth and see that we had a crowded booth and everybody was really into what we're doing, that would be worth something. Problem is, again, we're a strategy game. For those of you who are at PAX South, you might remember we had our little booth, and right across the hallway from our booth was a game called Just Blocks and Shapes. And good game. I have nothing against Just Blocks and Shapes. Now, Just Blocks and Shapes is a very fun game. It's a very fun game to watch someone else play. It's a very short game that you can play a whole game in the length of half a song or something like that. It had a huge audience around it. So if you walked by that booth, you saw at any given point during the day 15, 20 people around that booth laughing and enjoying that game. That's a very convention-friendly game. It does well in that environment. And so people who are interested in that kind of thing can walk by and see that and say, oh, that's a success. Maybe I ought to write about it. Maybe I ought to put that on the list of stuff I look at. Now, if you had walked by the Last Regiment booth, you would have seen through most of the convention 4 or 5 people quietly sitting and enjoying our game. Not very exciting. It's not an incredibly fun game to watch somebody else play quietly and silently. So yeah, it was pretty low energy in the booth. So is that going to draw people in? Not sure it does. And again, when we get back to the what are the What are the people we really want to reach? Because remember, again, the important thing is not reaching a bunch of people, it's reaching the right people. It's the same with media, right? If Kotaku talks about our game, that's nice, I guess, but that's not really a strategy game focused media outlet. But there are strategy focused media outlets. There are places where strategy gamers go to talk about strategy games. If we can get into those spots and get those people to look at our games, but you know what? Those people don't really hang out at those game conventions very much. And so again, I'm not sure that the game convention, in terms of advertising, even to media, is necessarily the right venue. I'm not sure that that's the best spend of money for us. And again, what else could I spend that $5,000 on? Another thing we did for Callasia, we did Kickstarter. We did 2 Kickstarters that failed, 1 that succeeded. We put a lot of time and energy into them. We didn't get much out of either one. Does that mean Kickstarter is a waste of time? No. I'm sure there are people who do well on Kickstarter. I will say, as the years progress, video games have done less and less business on Kickstarter. People just aren't interested in funding a video game that's not made yet. They don't believe in it. They don't know what's going on. There's been a couple pretty high-profile failures, so I think Kickstarter is a less exciting place for people to be showing their game than it used to be. So I'm not sure I buy into Kickstarter as a great place for video games right now. For a strategy game like ours, I know we've been to that particular well a couple times, and I'm not real excited about it. So will we go there again? Probably not. Live streams is another thing we spent a lot of time and energy on in Callasia, going out and finding live streamers and actually paying live streamers and blah, 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 blah. We did all that with Callasia. Again, the metrics on it were that time was not incredibly well spent. That money was not incredibly well spent. We just didn't get a lot of return out of it. Now, why is that true? Now, there are other games that have certainly had huge success with that. But I actually spent some time doing some research on this and looking at what kind of games do well. If you are a game that streams particularly well, yes. For some games that don't stream particularly well, no. And I looked at games that are our big competitors, games like Europa Universalis or Civilization. Very few people stream these games. Even though those games are top of list, huge games on Steam, make a lot of money on Steam, top winners on Steam, they have almost no streams. And so while I certainly will continue the live stream for development, we'll certainly support streamers who want to do our game, again, I think relying on streamers to be the thing that's going to power a strategy game like this, I think is probably a mistaken strategy. We've been down that road before, but more importantly, I went and looked at our direct competitors, and our direct competitors who have a lot more time, a lot bigger marketing budgets, and spent a lot more time marketing these games than us. They have not done that thing, and there's got to be a reason why they don't do that thing. And it's not that they're stupid, it's that somebody has done the math and said, you know what, that's not the best way to spend money. So given those 3 things, conventions, Kickstarters, live streams, that was where we put our emphasis on Callasia. I am not doing that again. That doesn't mean we won't go to conventions. It doesn't mean we won't do live streams. But if I rely on those 3 things to be what powers our game forward in our marketing strategy, I think we're going to fail. Drink of tea. So, what are we going to concentrate on? Steam. Steam. What I realized was we had an okay Steam site, but we didn't fully understand the algorithm at Steam. We didn't fully understand how important what we were doing on Steam was. And this is critical. We didn't understand how important the video on Steam was. We had an okay video that we built in the last couple of weeks of building the game where we had some footage from the game and blah, blah, blah. It was okay, but it wasn't amazing. When you go look at the games that are doing really well on Steam, they do a couple things. One, they have a video that very clearly intrigues people about the story and the lore and the feel of the game, which we did very poorly in our video for Callasia. That video usually doesn't have a huge amount of gameplay. It's got just enough screenshots and gameplay that you can look at it and be like, oh, I know what that game's going to be. There's usually a second video, which is the gameplay focused video that people who are interested in the game can go look at and see the gameplay. Um, the games that have done well have spent a lot of time and money on these videos. And when we talk about that $5,000 I spent to go to PAX and that $5,000 I spent to go to PAX East, if I were to put those two together, that's $10,000. I can make a hell of a good video for $10,000 in this team. So one thing, one of the questions over in chat was, if you're not going to do conventions, what will you spend that money on? Videos. Absolutely, we are putting together the lore and the story and the time to put together a really amazing video that that can draw people in, that's right there on the Steam page, because we know by far the most important marketing vehicle for this game is that Steam page. And so we want to have the critical part of that Steam page, which is that opening video, be the most amazing thing people have ever seen, and put the time and energy and money on that. So that's one big place that we're going to put money and time and energy that we didn't on Callasia. The next, I think we are actually going to pay for some ads. Again, I know the return on Facebook ads and Google ads is not always great, but we can target them quite specifically. We can go through and say, I only want to show this to people who love Civilization, who've played Civilization a lot. There's a bunch of targeting options that we're allowed to use that we can really target down to exactly the kind of person we want to find. And we can do a pretty big burst campaign of that right before the early access launch, and again, right before the full launch. And again, when I'm looking at where it makes sense to spend money, those are two places that it makes sense to spend money. The third, a bigger focus on getting our game in front of specific strategy-oriented media. And I think what I'm going to be working with Monica is putting together a list of not just game media, but specific strategy-oriented media, whether it's magazines, I guess there's still a few of those left, but websites, which there's some left, or particular streamers and live tubers, that's not even a thing, YouTubers, live streamers and YouTubers who are specifically focused on strategy games, and putting together a hit list of a couple critical people like that, and trying to hit those people so that we can hit them much later in the process, to be honest. One of the things I think we had with Callasia was almost a kind of fatigue, where people were like, when is this game going to come? I've been hearing about this game for years. When is it going to come out? Blah, blah, blah. Obviously, the people watching this live stream and the people who are over on our Discord, they've been hearing about this game for well over a year now. But yeah, come on, it's like 50 people, right? That's not fatigue in the industry. That's fatigue in our core users. And you guys don't seem fatigued. You seem to be into this. So when we talk about the larger world and the larger media, I want, from the time they hear about this game and they're interested in this game to the time when they can go download it, to be a very short period of time, because I don't want them to forget about this game. So having that marketing blitz quite late in the process, literally a week or 2 weeks before the early access launch, and again a week or 2 weeks before the full launch, I think that's going to be time better spent, because those people need to have something actionable, right? If it's a live streamer who's like, oh, I heard about your game, it's cool, what can I do about it right now? Oh, keep in touch and we'll let you know in a couple months when it's out, that's useless. But if it's, you can stream this game right now, or you can do an article with a game with a link to this game and a review of this game right now, that's something that people can sink their teeth into. So we'll spend our time and energy on that. So that's it. Concentrate on the Steam page, concentrate on the video, concentrate on some paid ads right before, a marketing blitz right before we launch the things. And then finally, changes in games, stuff like I talked about before with this this thing right here behind my head, where we put a lot of our sort of marketing and how do we get the virality of our game right into the game, so that people can click on things and let people know that they're here and blah, 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 all of that.